Okay, folks, I think we're ready to roll. My name is Art Heitzer. I'm listed as co-chair of the Cuba Subcommittee of the National Lawyers Guild. And on behalf of the subcommittee, I want to welcome all of you for coming. We are also online as well as being live in person at the conference. And we're very honored to have a distinguished group of speakers here today. I'll just begin very briefly from at least April of 1960, when the U.S. State Department adopted in secret the memo that says that because the Cuban Revolution they assessed was overwhelmingly popular among the people in Cuba, that the U.S. government should, without obvious identification or attribution, adopt a policy to, and this is a direct quote, to bring about hunger, desperation, and overthrow of government, end quote, in Cuba. And from 1960 through the current time, that policy has basically been in place. Up through and including January of this year with the executive order declaring that Cuba was a threat to the United States and that any country that would supply oil to Cuba, either donation or by sale, would be subject to punitive tariffs, which has resulted essentially in no oil coming to Cuba with the exception of one Russian oil tanker very recently. So that's the context, other than the fact that, as you will see, if you haven't already, in the resolution that was adopted by the convention, condemning the U.S. policy up through and including that executive order. This is clearly illegal and in violation of what is called in the United States Constitution, quote, the supreme law of the land, end quote, which is any ratified treaty in which the United Nations Charter is clearly
Sorry, is the mic on?
It doesn't sound like
Yeah.
Because we're having
Bump it a
hard
couple
time
times.
hearing you.
1, 2, 3.
Check the mic.
Can you,
Knock on it.
little black thing that can-
It was on.
Never plugged in? Yes. It's on. It's on.
I guess, yes, I gotta be close to 11.
Right.
So all of these aggressive acts against Cuba is in violation of the supreme law of the land as stated in the UN Charter, which mandates all members shall refrain in their international relations from the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state in any manner inconsistent with the purpose of the United Nations. And while the Security Council could impose sanctions, that certainly has not happened. And contrary to that, the United Nations General Assembly for some 32 years has overwhelmingly condemned, usually with only the US and Israel voting against, has overwhelmingly condemned the US multilateral embargo or blockade policies against Cuba. So that's the context in which we come here today to encourage and inform members of the Lawyers Guild and the legal profession and any others who may wish to view this, the recording of this workshop, to take action as the attack on the people of Cuba and the Cuban Revolution is more intense now than ever before. So we're honored today to have with us the deputy of the Cuban Embassy in Washington, D.C. to the United States, Dr. Tanieris DIÉGUEZ, who is somewhat new to the embassy in D.C., but was for the prior 3 years the Cuban ambassador to Australia, and she's also a legal scholar with multiple degrees in Cuba in the field of law. And of probably particular interest to many of us, was deeply involved in the process of drafting and the adoption of the new family code in Cuba, which has been hailed as the most advanced anywhere in the world. I'll introduce all three speakers and then we'll hear. So we're also honored to have with us from Orlando, Florida, Onyesanwu Chatoyer, who's co-chair of the National Network on Cuba. We call it the NNOC, some of us. And she's an editor of the Good Communist. And she's an organizer with the Venceremos Brigade. And we hope she can share activities that she is aware of and encourage people to be further involved. And our third speaker is Cheryl LaBash, who is also a co-chair of the National Network on Cuba. And Cheryl has been our host here in Detroit. She's a leading organizer around U.S.-Cuba relations. She has a background as a nurse. She was first involved in Cuba relations as a representative of her union, Public Service Union in the city of Detroit. And she's been a wonderful host as well. So that's what we have to offer. And without further ado, I would like to call our Cuban Embassy representative, Dr. Tanieris. DIÉGUEZ. You want to come up here? Or you want
Maybe,
Prefer, I think that here is fine, right?
yeah.
So we just move the mic.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak about Cuba and your presence here. Art asked me to speak in this opportunity about the current situation in Cuba, in particular the impact of the executive order. I mean, I will trying to put different parts of my intervention today. I'm going to speak about 4 points on the bilateral relation that put in context what happened today. The second part is the concrete impact that has been that this executive order has been how has been damaged to the Cuban people and economy. And I'm going to speak a little one about the conversation with United States and the measures that has been taken for the Cuban government for overcome this situation and move on for the future. And in a very summarized way, I would like to say that since the administration of Trump came to power at the last time, has been taking a lot of measures, unilateral coercive measures against Cuba. In particular, for example, the most important was the reestablishment of Cuba in the list of states sponsor of terrorism that, create a lot of difficulties for the Cuban economy, in particular with the financial mechanism around the world. The designation of Cuba, of course, on that list, create a fear and create a bad atmosphere about the investors, around the businessmen that want or would have interest to invest in Cuba. And this is, of course, have direct impact in the Cuban economy. Other actions of the President Trump in the very beginning of the last mandate was the reinclusion, the reestablish of the list of prohibited entities, and in particular, the reactivation of the Title III that permit to suit some entities with some interest that could have made trafficking under the Helms-Burton Act. That has been as well very, very damaged and has been proved that is, the Helms-Burton Act is completely illegal under international law. And the last measure, the last unilateral measure that was taken was the last January 29th, in which the administration imposed a block of all shipment and threat all the country with increase the rates for them if they sell oil or ship oil to Cuba. This is what the last measure. And of course, since January 29, we have not received, except for the news that everybody, I am sure that are aware, the last shipment of the ship from Russia, we don't receive any oil in the country. This has been create a direct impact to the Cuban people. Has been a lot of declaration and misinformation saying in the different media that this is not against to the Cuban people, that is against the government, etc. This is not true. The reality is that all these one have a direct impact to the Cuban people, in particular in very sensitive areas from the society, of the Cuban society in general. I'm going to give 2 or 3 examples only to show how this has been, damaged exactly to the daily life of the Cuban people. First of all, this is affect direct education, because we don't have electricity to keep schools, etc., and all the school system, education system that we have. Cuba is well known around the world because we have a free and universal education system for everyone, till the university level. But this has been very affected for this measure because, of course, the school cannot keep open for without electricity. But more than the education that has an impact, we have, of course, other impact in transportation, in access to food, but in particular in the health system that is one of the most sensitive area in which we have been received, has been affected for the blockade. More than 19,000 people, I told yesterday here, are waiting for surgery. 11,000 of them are children. 32,000 of women pregnancy has been affected diverse different treatment that they need. 3,000 patients of dialysis that need dialysis to survive and has been affected for the crisis of energy. 30,000 of children has been and has suffered in the interruption of the vaccination process. In Cuba, something that is a matter of pride of Cuba is the vaccination process, because when the children came, the same week they was born, they received more than 10 vaccines. And now this has been, affected, interrupted because the vaccination needs refrigeration to open, etc. Has a process in which need energy, and this has been very affected. We have need to reorganize the capacity of the hospital, to reorganize and accommodate the patient in different hospitals. We are trying to put the low level of oil that we have in the main essential hospitals in different parts of the country, trying to, to put the resources in when we, trying to save some lives, in particular children, babies, newborns, etc. And well, of course, that the cost of energy have an impact in the keeping of refrigerated foods, the access to food, etc. Even when all of these are happening, and it's very hard, it's very tough for the Cuban people, it's a very hard situation. We always has been and has conveyed the message to the different United States administration that we have the willingness to speak with the United States. Cuba is a country of peace. We have always have the willingness to have good relations with the United States, to sit and talk about any issue. We consider that all the difference can be resolved, speaking through the dialogue, and this is important. It is a way in which Cuba has been resolved during many years of the revolution, the conflict, any disagreement with other countries. Why we cannot do that with the United States? If we have border in common, we are interest in common because we are neighbors, and we have been always showing this willingness to the different administration of the United States since the very beginning of the revolution. This is not new. And for example, periods before this administration, like Obama administration, show clear to the world that we are able to do that if we sit and talk, even when are different, even when we have ideological difference, we can resolve some problems to find a way to move forward in different areas in which both countries has interest and that are good for both population, and this is good for the Cuban people and for the American people, because the blockade is not good for the Cuban people, of course, but it's not good for the American ones as well.
Right.
Because the blockade as well cercenate and the blockade restrict the right of the American citizen as well. They cannot go free to Cuba. They need the licenses and to ask a permission to go to Cuba. This is a violation of rights. And this is not good for the American citizen as well. Create damage in both sides. This is what I would like to remark. And this is why Cuba has always the willingness to do that, to sit and talk about with the United States, despite any ideological difference we know that we have ideological difference, but we can speak about common interests, drug trafficking person, protection of border, protection of the sea that we have in common, protection of the spaces of the bio life that we have. I need to protect. Biodiversity that we have on the sea, on the deep sea. A lot of issues that we have in common that we can address and sit and there is no. As Cuba said, our president said 2 weeks ago, there is no issue forbidden for this conversation. The only thing is Cuba asks for respect to our sovereignty, for respect our constitutional order. The constitutional order of Cuba, as well as the constitutional order of the United States, is not on the table of the negotiation. but it's the normal rule to any conversation, to any negotiation around the world. It's like, I mean, through doing like that. I mean, like this principle, through this principle, and of respect each other, or respect the sovereignty and the self-determination right of each country. This is why, I mean, this is the main message that we have been conveying, and well, in the middle of these circumstances, we are trying to reaccommodate and to look different ways to move forward on the energy, particular in the energy issue, because it's a matter of it's important to change the matrix of energy of the country, and to take measures, I mean, to overcome the situation and move on. In that regard are all the measures that I explained yesterday regarding the solar panel, the installation of and look to the new renewable energy source, to change the matrix of energy of the country. I mean, reorganizing everything and trying to be creative how we can use the oil that we produce. We produce more or less the 40% of the oil that we need, but we cannot use because it's very heavy. We are trying to improve in the research to use it and how to use it in our own, I mean, plans, etc. I mean, we are trying to look different ways to move forward, to overcome the situation, and I mean, to move on. This is the update of the situation today. This is, I mean, it's a hard situation. It's very hard for the Cuban people, but I mean, we will resist, and we will keep the principle of defend our sovereignty, because it's part of the main value and tradition of the Cuban people. And well, I am open to questions. Thank you for the opportunity to speak about our reality, to speak about Cuba. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. So our next.
Yep.
You're next to word. So, Anye will be our next speaker, and we can have questions probably for the full panel. So, and we'd love to hear more about your editorship of the Fifth Communist and your work with the Venceremos Brigade.
All right. Hi, everybody. Some familiar faces.
To the mic.
Hello. Sorry about that. Glad to see some Mayday Brigadistas, some comrades that I have met before, but also so many new faces in the room. Thank you so much for having us. So my name is Onyesanwu Chatoyer. I am a co-chair of the National Network on Cuba. I'm one of 5 alongside Cheryl. I'm also organizer with the Venceremos Brigade. The Venceremos Brigade is the oldest U.S.-Cuba solidarity delegation in existence. We have been taking people continuously to Cuba for over 50 years. I think it's like 57 years now. Tens of thousands of people brought from the U.S. to Cuba. The Venceremos Brigade was founded shortly after the victory of the Cuban Revolution by members of the Black Panther Party, by members of Students for a Democratic Society, by members of the Young Lords, who were basically young people who wanted to take direct action in opposition to the US government's policy of attempting to destroy the Cuban Revolution by attacking the Cuban people. And so they loaded on board a barge, I believe, and sailed 3 weeks to Cuba and harvested
Dairy boat.
Oh, what is it? What?
A dairy boat.
A dairy boat, and then harvested sugarcane alongside the Cuban people. And ever since then, we have brought brigades to Cuba every single year. We only missed one in 2020 when Cuba's borders had to be closed because of the COVID-19 pandemic. But otherwise, we have continued to bring people to Cuba under very, very different conditions each time. For most of the history of the Venceremos Brigade, we did what was known as unlicensed travel, a challenge to U.S. policy attempting to restrict travel between the U.S. and Cuba. For a long time, the U.S. said that U.S. citizens were not allowed to go there, and the Venceremos Brigade was like, we are free to make friends with whoever we choose. We are free to travel as U.S. citizens, and we are going to take direct action against an unjust policy and express our solidarity with the Cuban Revolution. Of course, when people in the United States or anywhere in the world take collective action against imperialism, against repressive U.S. policy, the response from the U.S. government is more repression. And so there is a long history of that within the Venceremos Brigade as well. We have had straight up feds attempt to infiltrate brigades. We have had people travel to Cuba and then a few months later get a knock on their door from the FBI trying to intimidate them. We've gotten, fan mail from the feds asking questions about our travel, all kinds of attempts to intimidate folks, to attempt to discourage them from traveling to Cuba. None of it has ever been successful. Now we do take licensed trips to Cuba because of the licenses that Tanieris just mentioned, provided by OFAC. However, we still experience, despite the fact that it's licensed travel, we get like American Airlines tickets, take flights from Miami, very out in the open. Despite the fact that it's licensed travel, we still experience repression. But what it looks like now is that when people are returning to the United States from Cuba, they are often detained by Customs and Borders Patrol for sometimes several hours, and they are asked repeated questions about their travel and who they talk to. Their belongings are searched, their devices are seized, and it's basically an attempt to intimidate people away from traveling to Cuba, to scare them, essentially. And so our legal support has been a really integral part of how we are able to continue organizing the brigade, even in the face of different kinds of repression. We have a very robust legal practice. We have a strong legal team, and it's really like instrumental to us being able to do this work, and also to creating like a large number of brigadistas who cannot be intimidated by these repression efforts. So one of our comrades is Comrade Sophia Elijah, who was really instrumental, a radical movement lawyer. She was Marilyn Buck's lawyer, but she was really instrumental in developing the legal practice of the Venceremos Brigade. She helped us develop a legal prep that every single brigadista goes through, that helps them understand what to expect when you cross back into the United States, the attempts at repression, which may happen, how to answer those questions in a way that gives up as little information as possible to the feds, and also let people know their rights when they are crossing the border. And because we have that really robust legal prep, we are able to take large groups from Cuba to the US and back, have people be detained, and still have those people come back on the trip. And so what we're really interested in now, we started working with the Mayday Brigade more closely. We contributed our legal prep to the Mayday Brigade last year, and so the Mayday Brigade brigadistas went through that prep. And we want to be able to continue spreading that practice throughout the Cuba Solidarity Movement. The convoy that happened in March, which was incredible, brought so much aid to Cuba, brought so much visibility to the blockade, experienced exactly this kind of repression on the way back. Like, I believe there was like 10, 15 people that got detained on the way back from the convoy that had their phones and devices seized. 25 people had their phones and devices seized, were subjected to intimidation and questioning. And so that is the experience we want to prepare people for. And in order to collectivize this legal practice across the movement, we need more lawyers. We need more lawyers. There's mad lawyers in the room. And I already know that you believe in social justice. I already know that you are progressive and anti-imperialist. And so like a call to action I want to share in this space is to help us build this legal practice across the Cuba Solidarity Movement. Because it should not be that people just have to come on the Venceremos Brigade or just have to come on the Mayday Brigade in order to get this legal prep. We wanted to give it to every single person that travels to Cuba so that when the feds are pulling people to the side, they are prepared, they are disciplined, they are militant, and they're not scared. And they go back home and they tell people what happened to them, and more people come to Cuba. And y'all are like really instrumental to that. The other thing I wanted to say is that we can expect this repression to escalate. We have a very hostile, like all US governments are hostile to Cuba and hostile to anti-imperialist nations, but this government in particular represents an escalated level of hostility. And so we can expect the repression to escalate. we can expect that they're going to go for licensed travel. I think that the days of buying an American Airlines ticket to Havana are becoming numbered, simply because the US is very, very interested in breaking the ties between people living in the United States and people living in Cuba. And they're doing so by, of course, attacking the Cuban people and escalated the blockade, but also attempting to intimidate the US-Cuba solidarity movement. And so it's really important in this time, while we still have a little bit of breathing room, to build that legal practice, to collectivize that legal prep across the Cuba solidarity movement, to bring more people to Cuba and get them ready to face that repression and resist it. And the last thing I'll say is that there's another opportunity to travel to Cuba for folks that haven't been. And I think in order to really lock in and activate people in Cuba solidarity work to help them understand why it's so important, the best possible thing you can do is to go to Cuba. You have to see it for yourself. You have to see what the impact of the blockade is like. We can talk about it all day. We can talk about the impact. We can give the numbers, but it's a very, very different thing to go there and see the vast, completely unnecessary suffering created by the US government and Cuba. And then you talk to Cubans and they're just like regular people. They're just like us. They're just like us, trying to live, trying to survive, and being faced with this incredible hardship and repression simply because they want to live a different way. So another opportunity to come to Cuba is happening in August. This August is Fidel Castro's 100th birthday. It's the centenary of Fidel Castro, and the Venceremos Brigade and the National Network on Cuba are joining forces to organize a centenary of Fidel Brigade. We want to bring 150 people from the US to Cuba to commemorate Fidel Castro's birthday, but also to bring material aid and to educate people about the reality of the blockade on the island and to build ties between movements for justice in the United States and in Cuba. So I'm a very excitable person. So I was at the Walter Rodney Symposium and I had a stack of postcards and I gave them all away. But I have one. And so maybe y'all can pass it around and take a picture. But the application for this brigade is still open. It actually closes on Wednesday. We're traveling to Cuba together. We're still actively recruiting. And it would be so wonderful if we can get more folks from the NLG on this brigade. So I'm gonna pass this maybe to you in the front row, and then y'all can take a look, check out the links, take a picture, and please, 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 if you are interested in traveling to Cuba, please apply for this brigade.
And what's the website?
The website is bb4cuba.com, and you can also visit NNOC.org because it's a joint BB and NNOC brigade. And on the homepage of both sites, you'll see information about the centenary of Fidel Brigade. But yeah,
The date's August.
August 1st to August 15th. And do not, the trip cost is $19.50, but do not let money be an object. The fundraising game of the Cuba Solidarity Movement is on point. So even if you think you can't afford it, please believe we can work with you. There's partial scholarships. There is vast fundraising that's going to be happening. There's going to be gathering material aid across the nation. And so if you are at all interested in coming to Cuba, please check out the website. Please apply. The application closes on Wednesday. But again, we need to build that wall of lawyers. We need to collectivize the legal preparation of the VB and now the Mayday Brigade, because we need more people to travel to the US, to Cuba. We cannot afford to have them be intimidated or scared away. And robust legal preparation and legal support is how we make sure that that does not happen. So I'm going to leave it there, and I'm sure I'll have more to say in the Q&A, but thank y'all so much.
So next, we'd love to hear from Cheryl, who's been, again, a wonderful host here in Detroit. As to her contacts and her perspective on the NNOC opportunities and other reasons why you could and should work with us in the Cuban Solidarity Movement. Cheryl LaBash.
Thank you, Art, and thank you for being here. Especially friends who haven't been here for the whole conference and participants in this wonderful, very timely conference. What I want to talk about is communication and unity. Things have changed a lot. If you have gray hair, if you were active in the anti-war movement, if you were a participant in the wall of lawyers when before the Obama opening allowed legal travel or semi-legal travel to Cuba directly from the United States. Our ways of communicating have changed tremendously, and it's made many more opportunities for us to work together and collaborate. The March 21st convoy flotilla to Cuba is an example. By that united action of people from many different organizations all around the world coming together for Cuba and meeting in Havana, galvanized a whole explosion of media, articles, online, all kinds of memes, cartoons, short videos, online YouTubes, just a whole host of pro-Cuba media, a wave of pro-Cuba media that has been passed around back and forth and has reverberated. And then we have seen President Diaz-Canel in very, for us, it's unusual to see the president of Cuba on the front page of Newsweek or on Face the Nation. And we've seen a whole host of MINREX representatives speaking in these arenas, allowing Cuba to speak for itself. This is something that we have done over the years. We've brought Cubans to come to events across the United States, wherever we could, to make Cuban voices available, speaking for themselves, not us speaking for them, but to hear their voice, their perspective, like we have here today. So this kind of communication, breaking the media myth, breaking the media blockade, breaking the media lies against Cuba, telling the truth, telling how it affects us here in the United States, as well as the hardships in Cuba, and that it's absolutely intentional. It is intentional on the part of the United States, and now they have admitted it. President Trump, all up until for years and years, it's really the fault of the Cuban government. They're the ones who have the blockade. We heard this lie again and again and again. Well, now the United States has had to show its hand and admit to the public at large that it is intentionally damaging, strangling the Cuban people. This is a plus for our movement. The question is what we're going to do and how we're going to communicate among each other, how we're going to amplify our voices, how we're going to build a stronger movement. That means that things that have happened in the past have to be put aside. We have to remember that it's Cuba that we're fighting for and a future for humanity. This is not, it's not an intellectual exercise. What we actually do here in the United States, the belly of the beast, matters. And that may mean that we do things that maybe we're uncomfortable with. Maybe we have looked at electoral politics and said, I don't want to, I don't believe in the system. I don't want to do that. But speaking from the point of view or the experience that we had with the fight to free the Cuban Five, which included Gerardo Hernandez, who was sentenced to 2 life terms plus 15 years. And many people said the rest of them will do their time and they'll get out. But Gerardo, it's too bad. The strength of the movement and the strength of the Cuban people, the strength of the international voice made the possibility for all 5 of the Cuban Five to go home. And that was part of the beginning of the legal travel, or not legal travel. We've always had the right to legal travel. Travel. But the more open ability to travel and to engage with the Cuban people. What that took was going to Congress and talking to people that we don't believe in, we don't like, people who have been enemies on many different issues. But going there and talking to them about Cuba and letting them feel the pressure of the people. The people of the United States do not want the blockade to last another day. When anybody hears about it, any aspect of the blockade, they know it's unfair. It's just not an ultimate priority. But there are those of us in the Cuba Solidarity Movement who need to make it a priority. We have to find the social media, the capitalist media. We have to find a way of amplifying that. And it is really in our hands to do that. We have here people from the Michigan Action for Cuba Committee, which I'm really proud of. Because they are an example of what can be done with almost nothing. You know, the fundraising that's been done to send the material aid to Cuba is phenomenal and under the radar. There's no big foundation. There's no, huge donors who are contributing, but they've managed to raise enough money to rent a chartered flight with a minimum number of people on it and a maximum amount of material aid for Cuba. They have, yes, they have established through the brigades, through the Mayday Brigade and the Venceremos Brigade, established nodes in other parts of the country that didn't exist before, have established new organizations, one in Denver, one in Philadelphia. Now we have people in Tennessee, Chattanooga, Nashville, people all over that are beginning to work together, regardless of their organizational identity in other areas, but uniting on the interest of Cuba. So I know I'm actually speaking to the choir here, but I'm also speaking for the video. We can make a change. On Tuesday in Washington, D.C., there is a day to demand the War Powers Act is applied to Cuba. So there's going to be door knocking, and there's an opportunity for people in local areas to write letters and call their congressional representatives. So it can be a united thing, not just in Washington. On Wednesday, Doctors Against Genocide is organizing 1,000 white coats on the Hill. This April is the International Month Against Genocide, and they are including Cuba in that effort, and Cuba Solidarity activists are joining with them on the Hill to oppose genocide in Palestine, in Iran, in Cuba, and everywhere. Then on the 22nd of March, there is a briefing in Congress that's hosted by Delia Ramirez. April. Yeah, I've been doing that. Next year, April 22nd. There's going to be actually a meeting in Congress, a briefing that will talk about how children are the ones who suffer the most, and there are more children who are killed by coercive economic measures than children are killed in actual war. So these are opportunities. And when I come back to Detroit, I intend to find some opportunities here as well. So those of you who are from here, hopefully you will join. We're building a little coterie of activists who will insist on our elected representatives speaking to us about Cuba. And we're going to insist that they take the right position, which is signing on to the laws that the proposed laws that will completely undo the blockade. For the first time, we've had two pieces of legislation, one in the Senate and one in the House, 7521 in the House and 136 in the Senate, that were designed to completely dismantle the blockade. So that's all I have to say.
Nice.
And I believe there's a sheet with the legislation numbers at the table downstairs. The Cuba Subcommittee table. I think there's only one sheet, so you.
Could you speak to the mic, please?
The legislation that Cheryl just mentioned, there's a sheet, I think just one sheet, so take a picture of it, please, at our Cuba, the subcommittee table downstairs. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, I guess
What
so.
are we gonna do?
Q&A.
Yeah, so the floor is now just about open for questions or very short comments. And if you are willing to just state your name and maybe the city you're from, that would be great too. So who would-
Yeah, thank you so much, all of you. I'm Julie Hurwitz. I'm from the Detroit chapter, and I've been to Cuba over the course of since 1986. I've been there 4 times. And one of the things that has always struck me every time I've been there, and it's been mentioned by one or more of you about just the blatant dishonesty of the media that we in this country are exposed to about what's going on in Cuba in comparison to the reality of the struggles that the Cuban people are committed to build a truly socialist society. And now with this current wave of assault and the strangulation of all resources, I'm just curious whether on the island, what we're hearing here is, oh, all these people in Cuba, they're all just wanting to get out. They're trying to get to the US. They want to escape, you know, and there's this, everybody's so disheartened and they don't believe in what the socialist ideal is anymore. What's really going on? You know, how is the morale of the Cuban people holding up in response to what's happening down there?
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Julie, for your question, for being here as well. Cuba is a diverse society as any society around the world. I mean, in Cuba, we have people that agreed with the government policy and we have people that not, but the majority of the Cuban people, support and agreed with our system. As I explained yesterday, explaining the process that we follow up on the Cuban Constitution approvals in 2019, we submitted to referendum, and the majority of the Cuban people approved the constitutional system that we are having today. This is one thing. This is the legal, part. But for the other part, of course, even if you have a perfect model, that Cuba is not perfect. We need to improve in many things, but even when we have a perfect model, if you take this model and put a pressure that bring nothing, that don't have food, don't have oil, don't have anything to develop, don't have possibility and access to anything. I remember 2 or 3 days ago, a very important Cuban researcher in the issue of media and internet, etc., explaining how the access to the different applications, to the different platforms for the Cuban research, for the Cuban student are prohibited, because the blockade, because the rule of the blockade. You cannot open Spotify or any platform in Cuba because you are going to receive, an announcement that says that you coming from the terrorist country, and you cannot use Amazon if you are Cuban, because you are terrorist, even when you are never killed an act, But it's considered like that. It's not making sense. And if you put all this pressure to a perfect model, of course, that the people that live in this perfect model is going to, trying to survive is normal and it's human. But the majority of the Cuban people approve and support our government and constitutional system. And the majority of Cubans who live today here in the United States want good relation with the Cuban people and want good relation between both governments because they have family in the other side. They have family in Cuba. And it's not true. It's a manipulation of the matrix of information that the majority of Cubans that are here want to, war in Cuba, etc. It's not true. And the reality is that the majority of people, and in particular the most younger generation, want good relation with the Cuban people and with their family there, and want good relation between both countries. That exists, to your question, exist people that has inconformity. Yes, for sure. Everybody in Cuba has inconformities, and we are Cuban have the tradition to speak about everything. We have people with opinion in any issue all the time. If it's baseball, more. But when we feel a threat to our country from a foreign power, is different. The national feeling is to unite it and protect the sovereignty, because this is that we are doing since we became as nation, and we will feel threat since the very beginning of the revolution became to the power. It's a national sentiment to fight against who want to take our sovereignty and to, put an obstacle to our development. It's because it's unfair. The people feel that it's unfair, even when the people have opinion if this policy is better or is not, or this economic policy should be addressed in the other way. People have opinions for sure. In what society the people don't have opinion about what the government does? In all of society, but in the only society that this is a news is in Cuba, because we choose to be socialist. Because when the people consider X or Y about any policy that take a European, for put an example, or Asian or African government, this is not news in the world and in the media, but in Cuba is. This is the difference, and this is in which we find the manipulation of the information. Of course, if you ask me, the Cuban people have disagreement with different. Of course, my dear. If we don't have disagreement, we are not going to go to the development. This is the way to move forward. To have disagreement, to look the best way, and to continue going on. And we are normal society. We are happy people. The only thing that we want is to live without blockade. If the people, I heard some matrix of opinion very bad and very manipulative saying that the blockade is an excuse of the Cuban government. Out the excuse and see. We'll see how we are capable. As some journal here in the United States said, let Cuba vaccinate the world, because we are capable to do that. This is the fear of the imperialism, that they know without the blockade we are capable to vaccinate the world, because we are research, we are center, we are producer, and we can people. With the ability to do that, And this is what we are going to do if we one day don't have the blockade. I wish that the people of Cuba deserve to live without blockade.
Reading the speeches of Diaz-Canel are very inspirational because what we hear the noise in the United States is, oh, Cuba's a failed state. It's, you know, everything is terrible. It's horrible. It is horrible, but it is not a failed state. Cuba, the measures that the Cuban government is taking to insulate the people as much as possible from the hardship and harm is really incredible. Just not just the solar panels, but the reorganizing work, reorganizing transportation, making sure that medical professionals can get to their jobs, prioritizing how the fuel is used, that it's not based on who can afford it, who can pay $20 a gallon. It's based on, it goes to hospitals and human needs more than anything else. And that in itself, that socialist organization, for me, is an inspiration. So whatever is said here in the media, listening to the Cuban voices, hearing, and everything is available if you're linguistically challenged like I am. Everything is available with the translation. There's translation links on everything. So there's no excuse not to read the original Cuban voice today and hear what people are saying.
Yeah, only thing I'd add.
These answers were excellent. And the only thing I add is just to remember what the Mallory Memorandum says, that the intent is to cause suffering and destruction among the Cuban people to destabilize their lives so much that they rise up and overthrow their government. And so the intent, and it's also very similar to US policy against Iran, US policy against Venezuela, US policy against many nations in Africa. They are going for the civilian population to attempt to create discontent in order to destabilize revolutionary, anti-imperialist, and socialist projects. And so when you come on a brigade, which I hope you will, in August, you may encounter Cubans that have very strident critiques of their government, and it would be a mistake, a very big mistake for people in the United States to go to Cuba to hear that discontent, even strong discontent, and assume that means that there's mass sentiment among the Cuban people to overthrow socialism or communism. Like, people often go from the United States, go to Cuba, find one Cuban being like, yeah, screw communism. And they're like, see, they don't want it. No, like that is what the point of the blockade is, to create precisely that kind of sentiment. And so we got to tighten up. We have to be disciplined about understanding the intent of US policy and not making the frustration that's intentionally cultivated the narrative about Cuba.
Yep. Oh, the wrong thing.
So we'll go to some more questions or comments. But why don't we share, there's a few options for people who want to make direct contributions, like to send healthcare things to Cuba. One of them is Global Health Partners, and it's ghpartners.org. You can figure out how to give if you would like to. And there's many other opportunities as well. The ghpartners.org. Who's got a question or comment?
Over here.
She's first.
We are honored to have not only our current president of the NLG, but also a former president of the NLG. So I'll go to Suzanne next. Bruce next is also here. Both of whom have been to Cuba on more than one occasion. Suzanne.
Thank you. Thanks, Art. Just want to build off of like what you were just saying about the need to sort of be politically disciplined when sort of engaging in these kinds of activities, because, and I'm just kind of wondering, I mean, we can talk about it later, but like what kind of like preparation that you do for your brigades, because, you know, I mean, the guild has the guild took me to Cuba for the first time, and that has usually been engagement with other lawyers and learning about the laws, as But I also did go once with one of the labor councils from the West Coast. And I was kind of a little bit surprised at some of the politics of the people who were with us. And then most recently, like, we provided legal support for the flotilla / convoy that went, which was great, right? Which was great, but there was also, there seemed to be a lack of, especially with the younger folks, like of education about, I think some of them might not have even thought about Cuba and the blockade until because this was announced, because and it's not a judgment, it's just that there's a trend, especially with the Gaza flotilla, just to hear about a flotilla and kind of be very excited to join, right? But even in that context, with the Gaza flotilla and the convoy to Egypt, there were a lot of folks who really had no real understanding of the political context of where they were going. And it was not only in some circumstances, especially the convoy to Egypt, ineffective, it was also harmful to the people around them, right? But in this case, I think, what we noticed, even though there were enough good political people around that they could mitigate whatever was happening, that there was some misinformation that was coming out because there was a lack of that political preparation, and I think that it would be great to know what tools you all use for that. And also the legal, this is another one. We provided some legal analysis over for the organizers for the two main organizations that were organizing this. And then we also said to them, we really need to have a meeting, especially with US citizens and residents before they go. And they were just like, no, we're just we don't think it's necessary. And then 25 people got detained. Yeah. So it's just kind of maybe a difference in their experience as to political repression, or I don't know, but that was kind of another issue. We're public about this. It's not a judgment. It's just what happened. And I'm also wondering what kind of relationships you have with solidarity organizations outside of the United States who are also working for Cuba, because we know that the blockade has an extrajudicial application, right? And there's a responsibility, even though it's a U.S. blockade. Acting in a way European countries are acting in a way that's complicit, and I'm just kind of wondering, any of you know about what the trends are in solidarity from there? If there's sort of some kind of attempt to sort of reach that or bring that up. So.
Yeah. Cool questions. I can speak to the prep we do with brigadistas as well as the legal prep as well. So it's absolutely correct. Living in the United States, we get bombarded with propaganda about the rest of the world, about Cuba. One time I was rewatching Seinfeld, which holds up. It's very good. But there was a random episode where they were talking about something oppressive and they just threw a shot at Fidel Castro. And I was like, what? The episode had nothing to do about Cuba, but just a random attack on Cuba in there. And there's so many pieces of media that are like that. And just think about coming up in the US and getting bombarded constantly, right? And so we know when we bring people from the US to Cuba, it doesn't reset when they cross the border. All of that is still in there. And so it's really important to do political education before we go, to prepare people for a very, very different political and cultural context. And so within the Venceremos Brigade, we have a very robust and mandatory brigadista prep process where we cover the history of the Cuban Revolution, where we cover racial and gender dynamics in Cuba because they are different than in the United States, where we cover basic conflict resolution skills and transformative justice, because when you're in a large group trip, things always go down and we do not get the skills in capitalist society to navigate conflict in a healthy way. And so we want to give people those skills so when it comes up, the whole brigade does not fall apart. And then we also do the legal prep and we prepare folks for what the blockade actually looks like. Because another thing that can happen, if you're used to, living in a country with stolen resources with a lot of wealth, you go to Cuba, you see the buildings crumbling, you see the trash, and you're like, oh, what a dump, if you don't understand the context of why it's like that. So the Brigadista prep is like quite robust. It's like 4 3-hour sessions that every Brigadista go through. And I also know the Mayday Brigade does a very, very similar thing. Like that is kind of like inoculation in union organizing. Like that's the intent, to help them start to unlearn some of the propaganda they've received in the United States and prepare them to go to Cuba and show up in a positive and collective way. And it's a very similar thing. Like the legal prep is part of that. Like we literally will walk through, this is what happens when you get to customs. These are the questions they ask you. These are the questions you have to answer. These are the questions you don't have to answer. And if you don't want to answer a question, we like practice a line on the advice of my attorney. I decline to answer that question. And we will make them say it out loud repeatedly. And then we role play, where someone will be like a customs agent and someone will be passing through customs, and we'll just like practice going through customs. And so like again, the intent of that process is to prepare people both for a very, very different context, but also to prepare them for repression when they come back. And I can also speak to like the international ties, but I also want to know if these comrades have thoughts. Okay, so the Mayday Brigade, we call it the Mayday Brigade, which the NNOC organizes, but it's actually the US contingent of the International Mayday Brigade that the Cubans organize, the Cuban Institute for Friendship with the People. So there's always a US contingent, which the NNOC sends, but also there are contingents from all over the world. Like my first Mayday Brigade was last year, and there were contingents from South Africa, from the UK, which included people from Ireland and Scotland, from France, from Germany, from Australia, from all over the world. And we're there together, and conflict comes up, but it's also like the solidarity with Cuba like unifies us and like pushes us to build ties across struggles. Another really great thing that the NLG participated in was there was an international solidarity with Cuba meeting in Mexico City, organized by the Mexico-Cuba Solidarity Movement. And we sent a US contingent. How many people was it? It was like 40 people.
Yeah.
40 people. It was really cute. We did a prep because when you bring people from the United States to other places, sometimes we don't act right. So you have to get ready. So we did a prep. We established like our objectives for that delegation to Mexico, like what political work we want to do, what relationships we wanted to build. We were particularly interested in building contacts in Mexico for sending material aid, because we know that it's going to be harder and harder to send aid from the United States because of this government, this administration in power. And so having contacts outside the United States that can help us get medical supplies, that can help us move things, was really important. So we made those contacts, not just with Mexico, but also with Argentina, with Chile, with Brazil, with Venezuela. And we were very, very intentional about like building those ties and still continuing to cultivate those ties after that conference. So I've only been with the NNOC for like a year now. It feels like a long time, but and we've been like, since I've been in this position, we have been very intentional about building international ties between the NNOC and other Cuba solidarity networks around the world, because it does have to be a globally connected grassroots struggle in order to take out the blockade. And then anything to add?
Can I add one thing?
Yes.
I was the brigade's lawyer for about 10 years.
What?
Yeah, way back in the day. And in the analog world, things worked a lot better because you couldn't catch a flight from Miami where everyone comes in and they haven't met each other like that. The Guild and its delegations, and even in the Guild's tourist trips in the old analog days, had to meet in Montreal or Mexico City and get visas. So people would arrive a day early and you could set up a program similar to what the brigade does now. And I encourage you to look on that website, because they spell it out on the website that you're going to sit through this, and this is the curriculum. And that curriculum is sort of been time honored and like that. In the Guild, that used to happen when our groups, both the official delegations and the tourist trips, had to sit down together and travel to Montreal or Mexico City, and nice things came, people met each other. But also that education and discussion could take place. We've lost that, over the years, and particularly through the disruptions of COVID, and also through the good phenomenon of there's a lot of tourist trips now, which has opened up Cuba. And it's just, I think that political groups want to remember to do political education, And in this era of let's do it online, and there's certain things you don't want to talk about online. And, you know, let's sort of just get there and sort of do it there, and maybe we'll talk about it in the hotel. Tightening it up the way the brigade has carried that into the 21st century is something very thoughtful, and people should think of how to adapt to the groups that they go in.
Thank you. That was Franklin Siegel. I have a quick follow-up question in case Susanna can't answer it.
I don't know.
You all
Where's this
have
going? Oh.
Copies of the resolution of the guild passed this convention. Do we know if that's available or will be available?
Yeah,
on
but-
the website?
I don't even know. Okay, there we go. There we go.
I think so, right? If it was unanimous, it doesn't have to go to vote online, right?
Right.
No, but it will be published on the website because the website is now where. the
But
actions-
there's no period of online voting because it was unanimous.
It's effective.
Right, exactly.
It was.
Yeah, so it's right. I'm not good with detail.
So we encourage you all to share that. You've
Yes.
got hard copies
Yeah.
probably
Yeah.
in your lap. But,
Thank you.
hopefully you can get.
You got 10 minutes. You got me.
Oh, yes, in terms of those of us who want to work on the congressional, the bills that are in Congress now, is there a list of congressional people, you know, the people who are most pro, people who are persuadable? Is there any sort of list that we could use to work on congressional people? It's being worked on. Yeah, people are working on that. The main focus has been now is go to yours first. Go to yours no matter what their position is, because making everyone, even if they're horrible, know that there are people in their district that are concerned about Cuba is really important. Getting your representatives and senators to sign on to the legislation. And then there's DSA, for example, has a really good online way of writing to your congressperson, finding out who they are, that sort of thing. And then Code Pink does a lot on the ground. There's a SETE and log that are trying to figure out strategically, but right now it's making noise about Cuba. The main thing is to figure out a plan to call about Cuba every day, call the White House even.
So we've got about 10 minutes left. We have a number of hands, so we'll try and move it along. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Ismail and I am a Palestinian. And I know firsthand how the imperialist system in the world under the leadership of the United States can damage everything around the world. And they have the capability of that. So we need to separate two things. First, the administration and its policies and what have you, because they are the cause of every single operation around the world, not only in Cuba, but also in other areas of the world, especially Palestine, Lebanon, and now Iran and others, even Sudan and Libya and what have you. And I can name many of those. So from that standpoint, I would like to express my solidarity with the Cuban people and the Cuban government and the Cuban system. I don't care what system the Cuban adopt, because this is their business. It is not my business. So that is put that aside. What I care about is we have to bundle up with other causes around the world so we can be more effective in doing what we intended to do. So we know also that they are capable of lying, deceiving, and what have you. And this is their policy, actually. Their policy is to lie and to deceive people and other governments. Just one example of that today, they are at the negotiations in Pakistan, and in the middle of the negotiation, they announced that the American government was successful in getting one destroyer going through the Strait of Hormuz, which is a lie, completely lie. And the Iranian government said, if that destroyer comes closer, we will hit it in 30 minutes.
I love it.
So you have to be aware of that. So the destroyer pulled back and what have you. This is their policy.
Yeah.
It is not the United States, but every other entities that are allied with the United States, especially the Zionist entity in Palestine. They are liars, deceivers, and occupiers based on the colonialism. So we need to make sure that those are two different things. And long live Cuba, and I am with Cuba.
Long live Palestine.
Thank you very much. Who else? We'll try to line up either very short comments or questions and let's see. Wherever we go, so. And if you state your name and where you're from.
Sure, thank you. My name is Drew. Thank you. I live in Detroit. Thank you so much for being here and sharing. Thank you, everyone. My question is about media and hospitals. In the Gaza genocide, I think American public perception started to change with what was happening with children in hospitals, really. Like, people started to see things that they could not ignore anymore. I've started to hear reports that in Cuba, they're performing surgery in the dark, without anesthetic. This is like, and it's interesting going back to your comment about forcing a regime change and the intent to cause suffering. It doesn't seem like the Cuban people are about to flip their government over. So what's going to happen? Is this going to, I guess, is the intent going to, I don't want to skip steps, but is it going to just keep turning into like more violent rather than regime change, like eradicatory? Because, hospitals, this is like a sick, twisted perception that hospitals are a viable target, but people cannot perform surgery in the dark, anesthetic. And then the other question, I guess, on top of that is, are there enough journalists in Cuba to document this? And are they able to get it back to us here? Thank you.
Who else does a controversial comment?
Very short comment. I had the privilege of being on the second Venceremos Brigade. And I think people, especially for younger activists, need to appreciate the role Cuba has played. That Cuba has been the beacon of resistance for the US imperialism from its revolution. I believe the first place Che went after the revolution was to Palestine. And we know what Cuba did in Africa. After the Soviet Union collapsed, it was Cuba that held up socialism almost on its own.
Yes.
The role Cuba played is unique, and the solidarity that they deserve is the solidarity that anyone who's against imperialism owes a debt to Cuba for what it's played. And the one thing I want to raise is all the work people have been doing is fantastic. From approaching the Congress people to the tremendous work I know that's been done in Michigan with the supplies. But the other thing I think we need to do is make sure that at every demonstration, and there are many demonstrations now, where there's going to be May Day, that Cuba is raised, that people are educated about Cuba, and that Cuba is seen as part of every demonstration, whether it's for Palestine, it's against the war in Iran, or it's for workers' rights, that Cuba needs to be raised. And I think we need to have a presence there and to ensure, and I think the potential of growing the movement for Cuba is manifest. And I have every confidence that Cuba is going to resist. If you look at what Iran has been able to do to US imperialism, Cuba people are going to rally for Cuba. The Cuban people aren't the problem. The problem is the world struggle defending Cuba and getting imperialism off their back, and we will do it.
Nice.
Thank you. And we need all of you who can, probably all of you can do something, to step up I'll just tell you that we're kind of understaffed and under talented in terms of dealing with social media, etc. But if you get on NLG Cuba, I'm sorry, NLGcuba.org, we need a little updating, but we will post everything we can. That's our Cuba Subcommittee website, and we can use more help in terms of getting our message out on social media. So if you can let us know that you're able to do that, spend a little time, that'd be great. Bruce Nestor is going to pass. He's a former NLG.
Okay, I had a comment too, but I think I had a question.
Well, we'll get you for some
Yeah.
thoughts too. All right. Probably have to have them. Thank
Hi,
you.
can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Hi, everyone. I'm Sandhya. I'm here based in Michigan. I'm a member of the Michigan Action for Cuba Committee. Thank you so much, Dr. Tanieris and Onyesanwu and Cheryl, for the comments that you've made today. I just wanted to add on to what Onye has already said, and Cheryl has said about there being a good basis for political education, direct action, legal organizing, that exists right here in Michigan too. So I know if a lot of you are based around here, you would like support in applying to the August Brigade. If you want to get involved in our demos and our rallies, we just held a solidarity picket with the flotilla and convoy. That was last month, and some of us are going on the brigade, coming up in a few weeks on the Mayday Brigade, and are going to be reporting back, on the findings and the Cuban people and our comrades that we speak to over there, what they are asking for us to share here. And we'll be continuing to build on that legacy of Detroit and Michigan solidarity with Cuba. So, you can reach out to me. There's a lot of us, there's quite a few of us in the room who are involved, I think, in political organizations as well. But if anybody would like to get involved with MAC or the Michigan Action for Cuba Committee, you can come and talk to those of us sitting here in this row, actually. Or you can go ahead and, if you're on Instagram, you can follow Michigan Action for Cuba. And just real quick, wanted to boost a political education resource that the NNOC Mayday Brigade uses to educate its brigadistas right now. And Onye has been pretty instrumental in creating this education. We have a Cuba 101 and a Cuba 201 set of courses. They're all recorded and they're on YouTube on the National Network on Cuba channel. And they cover, Afro-Cuban resistance, they cover the Cuban Revolution, they cover Cuba solidarity with Mexico, Ireland, and many other national liberation movements across the world. So that's a great place to get started. And those are videos with really engaging lectures and questions and activities that would be great to share with people. We also have a GoFundMe that we're using to raise funds for the charter that Art mentioned, that we're taking tens of thousands of pounds of supplies onto, and we could always use the support financially to make sure that the plane gets there securely. And that information on the GoFundMe, you can also find on our Instagram, but it should be on the pamphlets. Cheryl, do we have any here?
Down on the table.
Oh, beautiful, that we have down on the table outside. So please pick up one of those and share the GoFundMe with your people. Thank you, everyone. Great.
Thanks so much for coming by.
Yeah.
So,
So we'll take this comment and then we'll let the panelists.
yeah, so
respond.
this is more of a comment. And it's piggybacking off of what Anya was talking about earlier. When I went to the Mayday Brigade last year, the group that I went with on that time was like beautifully diverse. Tons of organizers, people from all sorts of organizations were there. And so when I went, I wanted to make sure when I came back, if there was any trouble, that there was an attorney that I could reach out to. So I did not realize how hard it was to find somebody, to line somebody up. I emailed a few attorneys, nobody got back to me, right? So we did the legal prep through the NNOC, which was great. But then as we were coming back across the border, certain people were getting detained. And the people who were getting detained were people who were naturalized, right? Lots of immigrants. And when I talked to other people who have gone on pretty frequent delegates, they were like, oh, we don't have that problem. But I noticed that it's because it's a certain demographic, right? And so when I was talking to this one gentleman, he's like, I've been there 12 times. And I was like, well, we need lawyers who could do these legal trainings. And he's like, well, but these legal trainings scare people. Then they don't want to go to Cuba because they're scared because you're making such a big deal out of it. And in my head, I'm like, you don't understand, certain experiences. I have friends who are hijabi. Every single time they get to the airport, they're getting pulled aside or, searched, they get a little bit of extra attention. And so I think that just maybe spreading awareness amongst other attorneys that, hey, there's people that we need to protect on these delegations, right, who aren't going to have the same experiences as you. And then we need to get resources to them, right? Because there's going to be a cross section who can access attorneys. And then there's going to be a lot of people in our communities who I've never had anybody in my family who was an attorney. No neighbors, right? The first time I started meeting lawyers was when I went to law school. So I think that we need to build a bigger bridge and just really support like a lot of these organizers so that they could go on these delegations. So Suzanne and I asked Suzanne for help with the legal presentation that we're going to be doing for the NNOC. But if there's any other attorneys in here who'd want to, just kind of be like, I'm here. Here's my name, in case somebody's asking for resources, that would be great.
Great. So I'm going to let the panelists make any cumulative remarks that they would like to at this point. And if you're willing to volunteer in any way, we have the sign-up sheet. I'll make it available. You can make a note on the back or put a star or something as to what you might be able to do or what time you might have. Thank you. Cheryl?
Yeah. I want to thank Matthew Rinaldi and Bill Montrose who are online. And that's basically all I wanted to say. And thanks to the National Lawyers Guild for having this event.
Yeah, the last thing I'll say is please come to Cuba in August with us. If you are even a little bit interested, fill out the application, get an interview. If you are like, I can't afford this, don't worry about it. We fundraise. So please, please, please come to Cuba with us. And also, like I said, we have to collectivize the legal practice of the Venceremos Brigade and now the Mayday Brigade and spread it across the U.S.-Cuba Solidarity Movement to make sure that repression does not discourage people from traveling to Cuba. And so definitely want to encourage folks to volunteer to indicate on the sign-up sheet that you're interested in like helping to build out that practice because we really need more lawyers and y'all are already with the correct politics. So thank you.
Well, first of all, I would like to remark one thing. For Cuba, the cause of Palestinian people is a principal matter. And we will continue fighting for the right of the people of Palestine. You are with Palestinians forever, and this is not going to change. And you are in the soul of the Cuban people. And thank you for being here and for the support.
Yes,
thank you for your kind words. The other thing is, well, if you want to continue, the dialogue about what's happening in Cuba, I can do it after the debate here. And the final words is for all friends that are here. Thank you so much for address the Cuban cause here in the National Lawyers Guild. It's a big opportunity for us to speak about our country, our tradition, our legal development yesterday that was good. And thank you, Susan, all the board, for all this year of solidarity. Thank you so much for having us and for this opportunity. And thank you all the friends for the warm welcome and for your your love for our people. Thank you so much. It means a lot for the Cuban people. Thank you.
Again, thank you all for coming. Thanks to the panelists for powerful and inspiring expertise. Thank you, Cheryl, for hooking up people online from coast to coast, from Washington DC area to Oakland. And it doesn't look like they're gonna kick us out of this room at the moment. So if you want to have any informal discussions, you're all welcome. Again, if you want to volunteer in some way.
Yeah, shut up.
The clipboards up front, you can put by your name what you're willing to do. Thank you.
Last meeting,